Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters and friends. I hope everyone is well. We are back with Musa Adnan. Musa has been obviously off, not only off from the show, but off from work and everything because he contracted COVID a few weeks ago. How are you feeling, Musa?
Alhamdulillah, bro. Much better, alhamdulillah. Just been recovering and stuff, but alhamdulillah, much better. How have you been?
Good, bro. Very good, alhamdulillah. Just lockdown is increased now in the UK, so we are not like I'm speaking to you as if you're maybe sitting in Pakistan or something, but lockdown is increased where we both are. So it's just a waiting game now, just to see how things go. But overall, good, bro. So look, today's topic, and just let us know, brothers and sisters, if you can hear us clearly. Wa alaikum salam to all of the guys that are on. So yeah, let us know if you can hear us. Just say yes in the comment section of this stream. But Musa, what we're going to be discussing today, bro, or the topic is uni life, education, or indoctrination. I must say that I'm quite impressed with the title I selected and came up with. It was actually my own invention. What do you think about it?
It's say it again, bro. What's the title?
Oh, you don't even know the title. Subhanallah. Okay, it's uni life, education, or indoctrination.
Yeah, that's a good title, mashallah. Nice.
Yeah, so we're going to be discussing today. Okay, alhamdulillah, everyone can hear us. Brilliant. So what I want to sort of go into, there's going to be different spheres to our discussion today. There's going to be some elements which are a bit more technical, discussing ideologies, philosophies that are prevalent in academia, and that students, but more specifically Muslim students, are coming across or facing or having to interact with. And then there's that more simpler level of the discussion, which is some observations that you have made, I have made over the years from doing dawah trainings, lectures, talks at universities, and just issues that I guess stem with us. So we go into the whole sphere of academia unprepared, which leads to issues and problems. And then obviously we're going to get Sheikh Fahd Taslim, who's going to bring the element of the situation on uni campus. And as I say that, Sheikh Fahd has just popped into the stream. Then the next part, we're going to also get Sheikh Fahad's take on. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Fahd.
How are you?
You're not late. Alhamdulillah, very good, Sheikh. I'm just introducing the show at the moment.
Okay.
So alhamdulillah. So yeah, Sheikh, I was just saying, there's going to be different levels to today's discussion. We're going to be, there's going to be levels where we discuss ideologies and philosophies that are prevalent on university campuses, and there will be a difference between, say, America and the UK, because there are different dynamics at play here.
Yeah.
And then obviously there's going to be a more simpler discussion, but not less important in any way, shape, or form, which is the discussion that revolves around the question: are Muslims going into these academic institutions prepared for what's to come? Because what's to come is obvious; it's right in front of us. So are we prepared for it?
Right.
And then we'll see if we can what balance we come to at the end of the discussion. And the reason, just to let you guys know, what triggered this topic was even recently, Musa and me, we sort of came across something very similar at the same time, which is, and this is an ongoing thing, which is a lot of Muslims, when they're going into uni, and by the time they're coming out of university, they are coming out with a strange type of Islam. Something is not right. They're just like confused. They have altered their views. They have left Islam in some cases. So strange things are happening. So we thought we'd touch upon this topic, inshallah. So before I get into give you guys the first question and open it up to you, brothers and sisters, I'm going to do is let me share the link so we can get you guys on and get your thoughts and questions as well, inshallah. I'm going to post the link in the comments chat section so you guys can join us. And there it is. Okay, so first thing I wanted to ask you, now I'm going to get Musa UK perspective and Sheikh Fahd America perspective. What is the deal on university campuses? What's going on? What is the prevalent philosophy, ideology? What is in the air? What's in the air? They're taking a leaf out of Dawkins' book. Something in the air. What's in the air when it comes to universities that students are interacting with and coming across?
Okay, I'll let Musa go first.
I think you should go first, Sheikh.
No,
America, you know?
it's a UK-based program, so you
Astaghfirullah.
got we
We
got
follow
to let
the
the Brits go
Americans, you know?
first, man.
You're a Brit and you said America, you go first. Come on, man.
All right, Bismillah. I'll go first. So I'll tell you just my experience having been on a college campus. I want to say recently, last year, when I was doing graduate studies at UT Austin. One of the things that I noticed was that it depends on the campus that you are on. So if you are on a campus like the University of Texas at Austin, it's a very liberal campus. And so a lot of the ideas that are being perpetuated are ideas related to, let's say, postmodernism. And so kind of this liberalism that gets kind of shoved down your throat, and Muslims then feel like they need to conform to a certain boundaries within your Islam, right? So therefore, if you're within this definition, this liberal definition of Islam, then you're good to go. So within that liberal definition, one of the things that's incumbent upon Muslims is to fight for social justice causes, right? Or to be part of social justice causes. And that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, we believe in social justice. But when that becomes the only defining role of the Muslim, from a perspective of we are Muslims and we are joining hands with others and we are all on the same level, this becomes problematic, because then the idea of Islam being the truth in exclusion to everything else gets watered down. And so this is something that, look, we want to, and so what happens is that now when you have something within the Islamic framework that's antagonist to this worldview of, let's say, liberalism or postmodernism, feminism, all the other isms that we find on relatively liberal college campuses, when, it's certain things within the Islamic framework run antagonist to that, that's when you find Muslims starting to capitulate on certain core fundamental values, which then you have an Islam that's defined by the society around you, as opposed to Islam being defined by Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's in a nutshell.
So what we're saying is that it's your identity is therefore not Islam.
Yeah.
Your identity becomes something external, which you then peg to Islam or link to Islam, and there's this type of amalgamation that takes place where you're Muslim, but your cause is something other than Islam itself.
Yeah, exactly. And and there's reasons for that too, by the way. I mean, I think it's not fair for us to say like, okay, it's just the society around us, because postmodernism is prevalent on college campuses, because it's taught, because this liberal framework is there. Therefore, we, as you can say, like du'at or Muslim leaders, it's not upon us or any sort of, we're not held accountable. No, we are. Because what we've seen up to this point, at least in the US, and I'm very sure things are different in the UK, but at least in the US, the problem is there's been this this lack of clarity. All right, what I mean by that is when someone is coming for, I'd like to know if this is halal or haram, and you tell them that's a difference of opinion, okay? And now there's not this kind of black or white area that you can stick with. And what happens is that people kind of crave that sort of black and white, worldview that I can just stick to either this position or this position, right? And what social justice movements do is they give you a black and white. They say, that's evil, that's good. And so because they're clearly delineated, now it's very easy to jump on, this is good, this is bad, and I will use, my means to fight against this evil, right? And in fact, that's the very idea behind postmodernism and liberalism itself, especially with these social justice movements, is that it gives... Sorry about that. And so I don't know why that's actually coming up. Yeah. So so what I was saying was that it gives you this black and white where you can then now say that's the bad guy and we're the good guys, and basically it's defined by other people who are, let's say, minorities or people who are suffering, and therefore, I would even say that there's even a fitri element to this. Right? Because your fitra always wants to go with that, like the people who are oppressed, right? And so therefore, you have this kind of general concept of justice. And that's why you can join people who are fighting for social rights, in these social justice movements. But the issue then arises, what happens when you have two things that are, that are two worldviews that are actually going the opposite direction? And that's really what the challenge is.
Yes, partner. So it's something, and again, we'll pick up on this later on in the discussion, but something you mentioned interesting, which is about the fitrah. Like people need something to stand for. They need something defined in their life, a cause that gives them meaning.
Yeah.
And it seems like obviously with postmodernism more rampant in, it seems like America as opposed to the UK right now, on campus, is that postmodernism obviously pushes the idea that it's all up in the air pretty much. It's all gray area. There's no, truth is subjective. You can, it has an infinite ways of defining what a particular thing is or a truth is, and etc. So in that type of atmosphere to still at the same time find a defined cause, I guess, is something that people would latch onto. But we'll pick that up a bit more on the discussion on postmodernism with you, Sheikh, in a minute. I also want to get your thoughts on sort of the more traditional divide has been the conservatives and the liberals on campus, and I'm sure that's still prevalent too, right? So it all comes into the mix.
Here in the States, it is, yeah.
Yeah, subhanAllah. So we'll go back to that, inshallah. So Musa, give us a quick synopsis or a summary of what's going on UK campuses, bro, as opposed to America.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So I think definitely there's a lot of similarities in the UK with what Sheikh Fahad did mention. You have but while the Sheikh was talking, one of the things that came into my head, I started thinking about the reason as to why a lot of young Muslims, start to struggle in university, right? One of the things I personally have noticed, I've had Muslims in my class, right? Studying history. I've actually had Muslims in my class who've got Muslim names, wearing hijabs, right? And one of the things that is actually, and this is not an exaggeration, it's actually heartbreaking. One of the things that's heartbreaking is it comes across, or it seems like Muslims have an inferiority complex when they enter into the realm of university, right? So they feel like they need to, in a way, suck up to these teachers, speak in a certain way, do certain things, right? We know the traditional approach on, for example, a woman shaking a man's hand is that it's not permissible just for no reason. You don't just go up to someone and shake their hand, right? You don't touch anyone that's your non-mahram, right? But it seems like just to fit in, no problem. We'll even come up with some sort of maslaha to justify that, right? We'll come up with something to justify it, right? Whether what they've come up with is even valid or not, that's a different conversation. It's why are we coming up with these type of things in the first place? It seems like there's an inferiority complex where Muslims want to fit in. And this is another thing where, this whole thing, I don't know, Imran, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but myself and Imran, we were on the phone the other day. And one of the things that really gets me wound up is when we see Muslims in this situation where they feel like they're on the back foot. They feel like they need some sort of Western, institutions' approval in order for them to come across as even educated, for them to come across as educated, where to the extent you will see people in their Twitter bios, Facebook biographies, and even when they go and lecture in different universities, and I'm not saying this is wrong, but I'm saying that you'll see with speakers, it'll say he's got a bachelor's from this institution and a master's from this institution, and he's got a PhD from this institution. And automatically Muslims now will take this person seriously to take their deen from, right? But whoever told you that these qualifications mean anything from an Islamic perspective, And I remember one of my teachers, when speaking about this specific thing, and we're not cavemen, we're not backwards, we're not people who are backwards in that way, right? But I remember one of my teachers, he was speaking about this in a specific way, and he was mentioning that your teacher, this person who's studying Islamic history in a Western institution, or is studying Islamic studies in a Western institution, right? Ustaduka kafir, like your teacher is a disbeliever, okay? He's literally a disbeliever, right? One of the brothers, he was telling me over here that he was in an Islamic studies master's course here in the UK in one of the leading universities, okay, in London. And this is a brother, if I mention his name, perhaps everyone will know who he is. And the teacher over there is speaking about Masjidul Haram is not mentioned in the Quran anywhere. And he's like, it's mentioned in multiple places. I can tell you them off my head right now.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So complete, where you have complete, and this is the issue when you have kuffar teaching you, when you have people who are disbelievers teaching you Islam. I'm not here saying, oh, he's a disbeliever, he doesn't know anything. I'm not saying that. I'm saying Islam. When they're teaching you Islam, because we have to understand our epistemology, our source of knowledge as Muslims is different. The way that we look at knowledge is different from the way Western academia looks at knowledge, right? So if you were to sit in a Western institution, they'll describe perhaps hadith studies and mustalah al-hadith, which is a deep, vast science. From the Islamic perspective, you have books written, like, for example, the book, what's it called? Subhanallah. The book that talks about ilm al-rijal and stuff like that. Subhanallah, I've forgotten it. It'll come back to me, right? But sorry, I'm not letting it go, man. I could really want to. Anyway, let's let it go. But we have books, complete books on just speaking about the narrators of the hadith, and this type of thing in a Western setting, in a seminar. What's the purpose of being in a seminar? If anyone's been in a seminar, especially studying humanities, like a subject like history or philosophy, what they're going to do is they don't mind you breaking something down. They don't mind you questioning everything. They don't mind, right? In fact, that's probably encouraged. So, for example, you saying something like the hadith literature is like Chinese whispers. Your teacher may even be like, that's very interesting. Expand upon that. Why do you think that that's the case, right? And they'll go deeper and deeper into that. And you as a Muslim, you're sitting there, especially a Muslim, and this is the last point I'll make on this point, especially as a Muslim, you don't have a background, because a lot of Muslims who go to university, they've never traditionally studied Islam. They don't know the first thing about Islam from an Islamic perspective. They just know about their cultural Islam. So when they're in the university and they're learning all of these things, by the third year, they're thinking, hang on a second, hadith is Chinese whispers, the Quran, we can question its preservation, right? We don't know if the Prophet, like, and I quote, we don't know if the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ ever existed. I don't know if my whole religion is true at this point. And that's where people start coming out with their own idea of what Islam is when they graduate from universities. And this is where issues come from. So, it's dangerous.
Some of the points I think I really resonate with the last point you're saying, which is look, because let's be nuanced. There will be cases where some non-Muslims, academics who teach Islam know their stuff, no doubt, right? They've really studied it, but you got to remember that every human being has a perspective, a way of looking at life, an ideology that they follow and adhere to. So they'll be teaching it through the lenses of that ideology. Now, obviously, in the West, generally, there is skepticism is almost like an underlying tool or a way of teaching, right? It's taught from a skeptical perspective. You're taught to question everything, right? Which isn't necessarily questioning.
Imran, I need to correct you on that, but I'll come back to that.
Yeah, so I was going to questioning things isn't a bad thing, right? But there are things that once you get to a certain level of understanding in regards to those, then they're beyond question, right? So there is a level of where you need to know where to draw the line. And I guess sometimes the way we're taught certain things by certain academics, it's with an agenda in mind, a sort of a way of doing things. So there is that element. But Sheikh Fahd, please, if you would correct me before I go.
No, I didn't mean to say correct you, but I wanted to just add a certain a nuanced point to what you said, right? And the thing is, you are allowed to question everything except the idea of questioning everything. All right. Now, what I mean by that is that, like, I'll give you an example. So I was sitting in this graduate level class on post-colonialism. All right. And I remember the professor said something. She said something to the effect of, look, when it comes to history, we walk hand in hand with all the perspectives that are out there, and we do not question any perspective, right? And so I only asked one question. I said, why? That was literally my only question, and it really made her upset. Like, as if I'm taking like a a first principle in history and questioning it. Like, how dare you question this? And then when I said why, I almost heard like a gasp in the rest of the students, right? Like, what do you mean, right? Because it's like, okay, so you're bringing this forward and say we're going to walk hand in hand with all perspectives. And I remember one of the students said, I think Fahad has a point, because would we take Hitler's perspective on like like Nazi Germany? And she said, well, not all perspectives. And then I was like, okay, but then who decides the limit? What perspective are you really going to take?
So would it be more accurate to say that certain things are, when it comes to certain things, then it's okay, we can question everything, of course. But with other things, there's certain underlying assumptions they won't challenge.
They will never challenge, and in fact, that's what I kind of got in trouble with in writing my thesis, was because the original version of my thesis was something to the effect of, and I'm trying to remember the exact title, which the professor was like, no way, you can't. Something to the effect of philosophical naturalism prevalent in the liberal arts. Okay. In other words, like I was questioning their paradigm. I was questioning their, in a sense, first principles. Yes. And that was a no-no, because how else are they going to judge my thesis except by the lenses that I'm questioning, And so I had to basically revamp the whole thing, and I did the thesis on Dr. Sarar Ahmad, etc. But that being said, it's just kind of interesting that someone who is in that context that does not have a background within Islam will just take those assumptions as, as true and accept them as first principles without questioning them. No. And the issue is, and like I think what Musa and yourself, Imran, what you guys mentioned, a lot of it has to do with your position as a minority. And therefore you have a dominant culture, and it becomes very difficult to run against the dominant culture, right? When you're going to come now and say, look, I actually believe, X, Y, and Z to be wrong, whereas the general society considers it to be okay. That's gonna be problematic, right? And in order to be in that position, you have to have a very high level of confidence that you are upon the truth. And this is the thing that, when we teach, and this is, to be honest, this is why I really wanted to focus on dawah training at universities. Because one of the things that dawah does is that instead of now you being on the back foot and always defending your religion, now you're moving in a sense, an offensive position to say that Islam is true and here's why. And while, there's certain spiritual and cognitive realities that repositioning helps you with. Right? Like I remember we were doing the divine reality, right? That the course on atheism at UT Austin. And we were talking about, I forgot which section it was. It was objective morality, right? And I remember this one guy, he was in class and he said, everything you said makes complete sense. But my professor, he's a professor. So how can I deny what he's saying? And I was like, who cares? Right? Even if he's a professor, at the end of the day, knowledge is not limited to, a PhD. In fact, you might even say that knowledge is somewhat limited in the sense that you have a lot of knowledge about a very narrow field. And instead of being, like what we have people of the past who were polymaths, who could do multiple fields, whether it goes all the way from physics all the way down to fiqh. And nowadays you have people that are just very narrow. And you're saying that narrow perspective is basically because a person has this deep, narrow knowledge of one specific area, that you're basically going to take everything that he says to be true. This becomes problematic, right? Anyways, so the point is, what I was trying to say is that I think a repositioning of Muslims going into university can be done through encouraging them to make dawah on university campuses. Obviously, when things open up, after.
So we're definitely going to pick up on that, because that's something I want to move on to into the second part, which is, okay, so what is the solution here for Muslims? Because look, let's face it, these are the institutions that have been set up. This is what's happening right now. But how do you not prepare yourself? Look, can you still benefit from these institutions? And how do you go into them then prepared? And what can you do to sort of, fix or create the situation in such a way where it could be beneficial for you as opposed to being detrimental for you, right? And something I want to sort of pick your guys' brains on a bit more is something you just mentioned right now, which is, as soon as you associate someone with a label such as PhD professor, there's an assumption there that most students make, which is, and most Muslims make, unfortunately, which is this guy knows everything about anything that there is to know. And we see also some individuals taking advantage of this. So a classic example is someone like Richard Dawkins, right? Now he's an expert in a specific field, right? Which maybe, I don't know what his specialty is. I think it's biology or something, or specifically evolution. He's a professor, or has studied to professor level, but no longer is practicing in his field. But you see him now, he has the professor label, he has the qualification or the title, and then he decides to speak about religion, he speaks about philosophy, epistemology, just everything and anything, that he wants to, and he's taken seriously because of this. So do you think this is a common issue that's taking place? And so it's on two parts. It's on the part of the individual with the label, and it's a part on the individuals who are looking up to the peoples with this degree or this label, if you like. Have you guys noticed this as well? Is this quite prevalent in your cases, like especially in America?
Yeah, of course. I mean, like I said, the example I gave was that one guy in my class who was like, but they seems so convincing because he's a PhD, you know? Yeah. And the thing is, I think Musa was mentioning this earlier about, our epistemology, like how we know what we know. We have a different method, right? When we're going to ask questions, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of, and it's usually interpreted as knowledge. But interesting, it's Ahl dhikr. It's the people who are remembering Allah, right? And so it's not just knowledge. It's not Ahl al-ilm. It's Ahl dhikr. So it means that there's a deeper dimension, a spiritual, educational dimension that's much deeper than just abstract knowledge that we're going to use to now, for no purpose whatsoever, right? Because, at the end of the day, we have to understand that all the knowledge that we learn within our tradition is linked to deeper existential questions. Once we forget that, then it's just they're just facts, right? And that's just knowledge that you're gathering without any sort of reality or basis to it, So I think the issue that arises that when someone has that image of the professor who basically knows everything and can move forward, and because they're at that level, this becomes very problematic, and especially in the realm of Islamic studies too. If you're, one of the things I tell people, I said, don't jump into Islamic studies at university level if you've had no background before that in a traditional setting. I mean, it's very dangerous. I mean, I was sitting in a class by a Muslim professor, and just some of the things that were said in the class, and I was almost shocked. I mean, she said, I remember at one point, and I was sitting with another sheikh who was part of my program as well. And we were both sitting in this class. We were like the graduate assistants, right? The teaching assistants. And she said something to the effect of, when we think about the Zoroastrian religion and how the fact that they have good and evil, in a sense, it makes more sense than monotheism. And I was like, what is she talking about? Right? Like, this dualism makes more sense than monotheism. Like, yeah, I get it. She, maybe she's very adept at using, terminology that makes her seem very erudite, very educated. But at the end of the day, something that's stupid is stupid, right? I mean, you have to call a spade for a spade, right? And the thing is, and so someone walking out of that class, and the class was about the Quran, which was, you would not know anything about the Quran, except all of the critiques related to the Quran when you walk out of that class. And this is a professor who is a Muslim herself, or claims to be a Muslim, right? So I think this becomes very challenging for young Muslims when they're entering into these programs, especially liberal arts, social sciences, and especially Islamic studies. If you're going to Islamic studies at a university level, you need to have some level of traditional training before you go into it. One of the good things about, at least here in the States, and I'm sure you guys have institutes there as well, is that we have institutes that are starting to cater to these needs as well, right? So I know, for instance, Qalam Institute in Dallas is doing a really good job about this. Sheikh Mikhail Smith, he's a friend of mine. He teaches there. Sheikh Abdul Nasir Jangda, I know him as well. And so the idea is that give people the tools they need so that they become future leaders. And even if they want to enter programs within Islamic studies, they have the necessary background to engage with the people that they're going to be engaging with. You know.
So before we move on, brothers and sisters, I know some of you are trying to join, but for some reason, I don't know if it's connection, but you guys seem to be dropping off when you come on. So I'm going to share the link again, and you guys can join us. So look, okay, let me summarize sort of generally what we've gone over now, and I'm going to go into a more specific question then. So from the perspective of America, it seems like postmodernism, a type of liberalism, is prevalent on campus, and that's the sort of environment, the flavor of these institutions, generally speaking. In the UK, it's more leaning towards a type of secular liberalism, naturalism, and it's more liberalism from the perspective of a way of life, as opposed to a political type of perspective. And what seems to be the case in the UK is that, therefore, the way, and this has been the case for a very long time, the way we're taught, it's almost as if whenever you're covering subjects or you're going into topics such as religion or Islam and these particular topics, the topics which have metaphysical dimensions to them, it's not all about the material and physical. Those subjects seem to be approached from the perspective that, look, it's just information. It's not real. It's not true. It's just we're studying this information that's out there. It's almost like you're studying any other type of history. So Muslims need to be aware of that you're not going to gain your deen from learning or studying Islamic studies at university. You're going to learn about certain things maybe, but they're going to be taught to you from a specific lens and a certain perspective. So don't let that throw you off. Now, Sheikh Fahd, you mentioned postmodernism, and that is starting to pick up and become more prevalent in the UK and UK campuses as well. Although I don't know if this is the case in America, but in the UK, it's not like people can identify, oh, look, postmodernism. That guy he's probably a postmodernist. This is that type. It's hard to identify, but it's there. It's in the air. It's in the environment, and it's starting to pick up. So why don't you define for us? Let's just sort of briefly define postmodernism. What is it? Because it's quite new to people as well. So give us a little definition. And I know it's hard to define because
that's it's so flexible that I think even someone who claims to be a postmodernist wouldn't be able to tell you what postmodernism is per se.
And that's the danger as well, isn't it?
That is the extreme danger, because postmodernism has it gets into certain areas of, let's say, critical theory. It gets into certain literary theory. Basically, for example, how you approach a text. So one of the ideas that is in this kind of general framework is that you can approach a text from your viewpoint, but someone else can approach the same text and have a completely different interpretation. And what that leads to is this idea of truth itself being relative. Okay, so as a hardcore definition, I don't know if I could even define it, to be really honest. But what it leads to is this idea of relativity, right? That you have your perspective and I have my perspective, right? And so if you're going to approach a text, whether that text is the Quran, whether that text is any book that you're going to pick up, you're going to look at that book and read the words from your experiences and worldview, and someone else is going to read it from their experiences and their worldview. Okay. Now, why this idea is attractive is, because we can now say that, nobody knows your own personal experiences. Like, I don't know the entire gamut of what it means to be Musa, right? I don't know the entire gamut of what it means to be Imran. Like, you have life experiences, you have parents, you have, you did X, Y, and Z. Only Musa can know what constitutes Musa. And therefore, only Musa can know that when he reads a certain text, that he can interpret that, because only he can do that. And so therefore, you cannot knock someone's interpretation because you don't have knowledge of that person. And therefore, what we want to do is we want to have respect for people. Let people have the position they want. And you see, it gets to be very attractive because, in a sense, you're showing a type of compassion, right? That you don't know this person's life experiences. I'll give you an extreme example. You don't know what it's like to be African American. You don't know the experiences, which is true. I mean, I'm not going to come now and claim that I know what it's like to be raised, in Fifth Ward in Houston here, because I don't live there, and I don't have the experiences of being African American. But when you take that to an extreme, to say there's nothing you can say about it, you cannot talk about justice and injustice from any perspective. You don't have the life experience to justify that, and that becomes problematic. This becomes problematic, especially because, when we look at, just the traditional sciences, a lot of in the realm of, let's say, fiqh is not determined on your personal experiences. It's determined on all the information that you have in order to come to a certain ruling, to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you make your best estimation based on that, and so frankly, the danger of the idea is this concept of the truth being relative, and therefore no one has a right for to say anything about someone's interpretation. And and this has its own internal problems, right? So if you're part of a social justice movement and you're going to say this is right, this is wrong, you're like, well, this is right according to your interpretation.
I was going to ask you that question in a second.
It's a self-defeating process.
Yes, yeah.
But it has a certain attraction to it because it's pulling on certain fitra strings, for lack of a better term, right? The idea of compassion.
It seems to be a lot of contradiction there. And I'm going to ask you a follow-up question on that in a second. So Musa, you're at university still, bro. Have you noticed this, like, in real life, where people are like, okay, the teacher's teaching something and everyone is like, okay, it's I understand it like this, I perceive it like this, I interpret it like this. Is this seems to be the case where you're studying as well, where look, it's just like it's up to me as to how I choose to interpret and understand things, and that's reality for me.
I mean, that's essentially what university is about, isn't it? I mean, when you're studying humanities, if you've interpreted something in exactly the same way as someone else, right? I mean, if you've got some sort of flair to the way that you've interpreted something and you've understood it in a very unique way and you've shown, your analysis is really, really good, etc. That's what they want to see from you. That's what they want to see. That's what puts your marks up, right? When you show that, okay, you question. Like, for example, I remember one of the things in one of the modules I was studying, one of the things that they loved is question the question. Question the question. Someone's asking you, why was it like this? Question, was it like this? Right? They like you doing that. But there's another thing as well where the understanding as well, like, it can seem very tolerant. Like Sheikh Fahad, the way that you were just explaining things, and you alluded to this, that it comes across very compassionate and very tolerant even. We accept what everyone says, etc. But it's not really like that in reality. It's not really like that. Like, I remember just recently I was reading a book on witchcraft because I have to do some research into that. And when you look into the
witchcraft, okay.
yeah, that's what one of my modules goes into. It's not actual.
I need to speak to your father, man. I don't know. This is not going the right direction. No, I'm just kidding.
It's not actual magic, but it's like looking into the history of magic. So
okay. All right.
What people would do.
I'm just messing with you, man.
Yeah. No, it's good to clarify, what people would do, how they would do magic, what their beliefs were. So in the early modern period, it's this is a clear example of what's going on. People believed in magic. It's a normal thing to believe in magic. Even believing in like the evil eye here in the UK, believing in the evil eye, right? Normal thing. This is not abnormal. It's normal, right? To believe in magic, evil eye, etc., stuff like that. But then all of a sudden there's a shift. And now it's these type of things, even in university, are spoken in a way where it's like it's questioned, did magic exist? Is magic real? Right? All of these things. And now if you go into the university environment, you're not gonna you may find some people saying this, but it's the epistemology is different. Look, that's the point. The way that they look at things is different. So whereas before, you'll find people saying things like magic exists, God exists, all of these things. Now, it's taken a complete different turn. Magic doesn't exist. God doesn't exist, right? And these things have different implications. So definitely, bro, this is something I've seen studying in university, to answer your question, where about different interpretations and stuff like that. And even in history specifically, because I'm studying history, one of the first things that you learn is about historiography, right? Which is the way in which history is written and studied. So it's exactly the same thing. So history, and a lot of people, they think history is just facts. Yeah. This happened and that happened and this happened and this happened. It's not that. That's not history. It is that, but at the same time, it's also what you do with that, right? So for example, some people will take the fact that Islam spread, and it spread in an amazing way, and within 100 years, it was here and it was there and etc. And it was all over the world. Islam was a global thing, etc. After the death of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, some people will take that and they'll make a positive thing out of it, and of course we do that because Islam to us is a positive thing, right? Some people take that and they'll write a different story from that, right? These Muslims, they impose their religion on everyone, and they went everywhere and they done this, and they forced people into their religion and they done this, and you see, so people tell different stories from it, and this is the harm. Where if you're reading even Islamic history from a perspective of a non-Muslim whose agenda is different, right, from just teaching you Islamic history, then you may learn the facts, but you may also learn the ideas with the facts that are completely untrue, right? That are coming from a narrative that stems from Orientalism and these types of ideas, which are directly in contradiction to Islam and its beliefs. So, I mean, and this is the point of what we're discussing. So, yeah.
Brilliant, bro. Let's take a question. We've got Saqib who's joined us. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, Saqib. Oh, he's gone. SubhanAllah. We're not having much.
You scared him off, bro.
SubhanAllah. Inshallah, I think it may be something, a browser issue or something going on. Some of the people have mentioned. But khair, so there's a follow up to this. I think there's a nuanced point here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to articulate this too well, but Sheikh Fahd, please elaborate, inshallah, on this point and let me know your thoughts. I think there is a distinction here, because there's a fine line between the postmodernist way of saying, oh, everything's up for interpretation, and I define things in the way I want to because there's an infinite possible ways of interpreting things and I choose. And between you studying a subject which may have different elements and ways of looking at things, and you come into different ideas based on the same facts. But I think the subtle difference here is that it's to see in the latter way that I've just mentioned, which is, okay, here's a subject, here's some facts, how do you string them together? There's still an objective to try and arrive at the truth, which is an objective reality. That's the assumption. That's what we're trying to arrive at, right? And that's a good thing from a study perspective. But from the perspective of postmodernism, it's not really that. We're not, because there's an infinite number of interpretations, and how we interpret things and which ones are given priority of others. This is all up in the air from a postmodernist perspective.
Imran, can I just add something here to ask Sheikh Fahd, right? So
add information. What do we ask?
Add something to ask you, right?
Okay.
So, because this is interesting what Imran was just mentioning, right, about postmodernism, etc. But what's very, very, and I think what a deeper question is, why have they made it like that for? What's the underlying reason for you to derive multiple interpretations? What's the reason behind that? Because if we think about it deeply, from having the ability to derive multiple interpretations, don't we then have the ability to say certain things are fine in society, right? People marrying at certain ages is fine. People marrying certain people is fine. People going into certain types of marriages is completely normal, right? And in that way now, you can justify, even from an academic perspective, many different, you can justify there not being a God. You can justify there being different types of morality, right? The Islamic morality is wrong, this type of morality is right? So do you feel like this is the reason as to why this has happened?
I mean,
to justify things in society.
Well, the thing is, look, there is a certain worldview that is being perpetuated, all right, whether consciously or subconsciously.
Yes.
Okay. Now, because the thing is, you cannot have a world. You cannot have a vacuum as a worldview. You can't come from a clean slate. Like that entire concept, philosophically, it breaks down 100%. You have to come with some sort of a paradigm or worldview when you're going to be judging things, right? Even the idea of like, is the truth relative? That comes from a certain perspective, right? So, when you were saying that, there's certain things based on that worldview, you can then justify whatever you want. Even things within the Islamic paradigm, you could justify, right? So you could justify 4 wives, you can justify whatever, things that people may find questionable. But the problem arises is that worldview has its own boundaries, And those boundaries, it's taken as, like I said, it's taken as a first principle. And therefore, you cannot cross those boundaries. Okay. And like I mentioned earlier, that was the issue that I had, when I was at university, because that's really what I wanted to study was, let's see how much you can push this boundary. And I found very quickly that you can't push it very far. Now, in terms of like, why is this worldview perpetuated? Look, anything outside of Islam, right? This is why I said it's important. And this is why I say it's important that a person, when they enter into university and they're studying social sciences, they're studying Islamics or whatever it is that they're studying, it's important that you understand your worldview before you enter into university. Okay.
100%.
And therefore, when you understand your worldview, you then understand the contradictions in the opposing worldview. Okay. Now, in terms of why do they perpetuate this, anything outside of Islam is going to perpetuate itself for the very reason that has to do with that which opposes Islam, right? So if you want to take it down to its bare bones, it has to do with the nafs, it has to do with shaitan, that's the reason why, right? That's why people move forward at the end of the day. It has to do with people's desires and shaitan, right? If you want to really just boil it down from our Islamic paradigm, that's why people are perpetuating this worldview. Why? Because if the truth is relative, then morals become, flexible. If morals become flexible, then as they say in the States, I do what I want, right? It's just, I do whatever I want to do. And if that's the case, then you can just run rampant. And that's one of the challenges that we have when we bring Islam. I remember someone had told me that shaitan, in fact, uses the fitrah against the human being, right? Because you have this general sense of morality, but you can always take that to an extreme, and overshoot the bounds, because if you don't have revelation that's locking you in place, that's where you keep overshooting the bounds, right? So you can go from a very conservative position to a very, ultra liberal position, back to an ultra conservative position, and you'll always be zigzagging and bouncing back and forth if you have nothing to ground you in the middle, right? You remember, I think I mentioned this in a different live stream we did, Imran, that the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned the Sirat al-Mustaqim, right? The straight path. And on this path are two walls, and they have these doors that have curtains on them, right? And the Prophet ﷺ mentions this and paints this vivid picture for us of this path. He says at the end of the path, ﷺ, is the Quran. And on top is a voice that as soon as someone goes towards a door or curtain, that says, keep going, move away. And these two lines or these two walls are the limits of Allah, the hudud of Allah, right? And the voice at the end of the path is the Quran calling you forward. And the path coming from, or the voice coming from above, is that internal voice. You can say it's the fitrah. Now, what's really interesting is that Dr. Israr Ahmed said, when you don't have that revelation at the end, then you're zigzagging from one door, trying to come to the middle, and then you overshoot to the next door, right? So you come from a very conservative position, right? And then you start coming right to the middle, and then you just overshoot. So you come from a position, well, you know what? It's okay. Like racism is okay. I just take a random example, right? Now, obviously, that runs against the fitrah, the concept of justice. But then when you start looking at that, you start overshooting and say, okay, well, if racism is not good, then therefore, people that, are going to be telling people that they can't live their way in whatever sort of sexual orientation they have, but then you've overshot, right? The only thing that keeps you grounded on that middle path where you're not zigzagging between the two is the Quran, right? That revelation. And that's what locks us in place. And that's why it's important for us to understand our worldview before we enter into the lion's den, right? Now, I want to just mention one thing, because I see a lot of comments, and that is, I'm not saying, and I'm thinking that Imran and Musa are not saying this as well, that you should not study at university. That's not the point.
Yeah.
We're not saying that at all. You should go to the university. You should get an education.
Musa's left.
What's that? Yeah, he left at that.
Does he disagree? We'll pick up with him when he comes back.
So the point isn't don't study at a university. Don't get an education. That's not what we're saying. We're saying get an education, but understand your worldview before you enter into that institute, right? And that could be based on the topic that you're studying. If you're studying economics, have some familiarity with the Islamic worldview related to economics. Like, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say things like yamhaqullahu riba wa yurbis sadaqat, that Allah destroys riba and causes sadaqah to grow? Well, okay, that's a foundational kind of way of looking at the world. And it runs completely antagonist to what any sort of economics courses are going to teach you, starting from microeconomics all the way through to statistical studies, right? But we're not saying don't study economics, but understand that there are biases within the field. If you're studying science, study the philosophy of science, understand its limitations, right? You're studying biology, physics, before you go in to study it, we're not saying I'm not saying don't study it. I'm saying understand the philosophical implications of what you're studying before you get into that. And this was advice, subhanAllah, that Sheikh Jafar had given us many, many, many years ago, right? I want to say maybe 20 years ago when I was studying at an undergraduate level. And that was, every field has a philosophy upon which it's based. And you need to understand that philosophy before you throw yourself in and engage with it. We're not saying don't engage with it, because obviously, physics, microbiology, whatever, all those things, medicine, those things you need to study that, right? But understand your worldview before you enter into those fields. That's all we're saying.
Beautiful, Sheikh. And this is, again, just to emphasize to everyone that, look, what we're getting across is that you need to have a good grasp, and this is why I want to take the discussion to next, and we can wrap up on that, which is you need a good grasp. No one's saying don't go to university. What we're saying is safeguard yourself by having, a strong foundation in Islam, in your tradition, in the truth. And it's like, we have to keep in mind, it's all based on principles, isn't it, at the end of the day? That from our perspective in Islam, and this is the truth, which is that there is truth, Allah exists, Allah is the foundation, everything is based around that. And then there's principles in Islam, and then there's an ethic. And all of these things together allow us, even in fiqh, you guys can give me more info, fill in on this, but there's principles and there's an ethic. And it's keeping Allah in mind when you are deriving rulings and coming to certain rulings, right? But what you're doing is, when we're going into the university environment now, we're going into an environment where the principles seem to be, there are no principles. There is no ultimate truth. There is no ethic, and there are no real principles to come to truth. So it's almost like, it's a totally 180 flip as to what Islam gives us as far as principles, and what we're facing in the form of principles when we go to education in university institutions today. And if you're not grounded in your own foundations, you're going to adopt those principles as your fundamental principles, and then you're going to run into problems, right? Everything's going to, even Islam from that perspective, is going to become all muddled and jumbled and mixed up for you, right? So
yeah. I mean, look, one of the areas we need to, and this is again on the du'at, on people like ourselves, it's just teaching people to have confidence in their deen.
Yes.
I think this is, even before you get to understanding your worldview, having confidence in your worldview, right? This is severely lacking. I mean, one of the things is, you go in as a minority, and then when you're going in, it's like, well, I have to now start apologizing for Islam. And if you can have that sort of that shift to say, look, you're not here to apologize for Islam, because Islam is the truth, in exclusion to everything else, right? And so therefore, this is the idea, and this is again why I say on college campuses we should be doing more things like dawah training, because when you are, when you're on the offensive, you automatically start to have a confidence, and not only that, that when you are engaging with people, then you're able to say, look, I have certain gaps in my knowledge. How do I fill those gaps, right? This person asked me this from their perspective. I have to come from a position of understanding Islam is the truth. How do I deal with those things, right? A lot of it has to do with confidence, right? Confidence imbues confidence, right? I mean, and the thing is, think about this. How many people do we know that say the most ludicrous things, but they say it so confidently that it sells, right? The crazy, I mean, I guess the quintessential example today is like, Donald Trump. The craziest things this guy is saying, and it's just like, yep, that's true. It's like, based on what? It just, because he said it confidently? I mean, but it's true. And your internal state has a lot to do with how confident you are with your worldview. A lot of this has to do with your connection with the Quran. The fact that we have kind of left studying the Quran, we can see the ramifications of that, right? Because again, a lot of the confidence that you get is going to come from your engagement with the book of Allah, right? Because that's when you start to look at certain things within the book of Allah, how ayat are arranged, how, what do they mean, deeper questions about your existence, all of these things, your spiritual connection with Allah, this entire worldview. But worldviews, you can be influenced. In order to do away with influence, one is to make your best friend the Quran, right? Because, like the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-maru ala dini khalili, that the person is upon the deen of their friend, right? So if your best friend is the Quran, you're on that deen, right? And the other thing is, who are the people that are surrounding you? If they're people who are good, who are righteous, who are people who are looking to better themselves, who are strong Muslims, that's what you want to have around yourself to influence you, right? We all know, I'm sure everyone right now is thinking about the story of the youth in the cave, right? And it's always mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the dog, all right? So Imran's not mentioned in the Quran, Fahad's not mentioned, Musa's not mentioned. None of us are mentioned in the Quran, but this dog is going to be mentioned in the Quran starting from the time of the Prophet and recited all the way through the Day of Judgment. This dog. Why? Only because of the company that the dog kept, right? And so it's very important. And I tell parents this many times, look at who your children are hanging out with. And that will tell you immediately where your child stands. Allah knows best.
So we have Brother Muhammad Ali who's joined us. Assalamu alaikum, bro. If you have a question, please feel free to ask, inshallah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. No, I don't have a question. I just wanted to add something on what Sheikh Fahad was saying regarding the Quran. Basically, when we're thinking about instilling confidence in the youth, I think that an important way of doing that is by seeing the confidence that Allah has in the Quran. So basically, the way Allah deals with the arguments of the disbelievers, like even if you have like good friends in school, they're usually not, they're usually like the people who are like basically a little sidelined and they're not really accepted. So like even if you're hanging out with them, you basically have a subconscious desire to be among the the popular kids in school. But when you read the Quran and when you realize how Allah is arguing with the disbelievers and the atheists, you basically shift your paradigm through an apologetic view of Islam into a severely offensive, severely engaging view that Allah has with the people who don't believe, with the disbelievers and stuff like that. So I think if you really feel it in yourself, then you develop that sort of mentality in yourself.
SubhanAllah. Are you studying yourself, bro, at the moment?
Yes, I'm studying second year architecture in Pakistan.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah. So, bro, how do you find, because we talked about UK, you talked about America. Obviously, we didn't have anyone to represent Pakistan today on the live stream. So, how do you find campus, the atmosphere on campus in Pakistan, university campuses?
I was thinking of writing my name as Muhammad Ali al-Pakistani.
You told us that, so it's fine. We'll get the information out of you, inshallah.
Yeah, basically, I just wanted to share this with you as well, that even in Pakistan, like I'm studying architecture, so that's basically not so concerned with social sciences and fields like philosophy and stuff in which you discuss these matters. But even our teachers who've like come from abroad and who've studied, we had this video, there was this TEDx clip that even I saw a video of Musa Bhai, he was critiquing it and stuff like that. It was that the hijab is not from the Quran, and this lady gives these like conclusions which I've never heard ever before in that TED talk. And our teachers are sharing that TED talk with us and are just trying to get our thoughts on that TED talk. So basically, even in architecture, we've been exposed to concepts such as, we should have one washroom for male and women and stuff like that. So basically, in every dimension, there's these things coming in. You just have to keep your mind on the track that, there is some indoctrination going on. Because if you think that these teachers are just, sharing these things, you'll sidetrack yourself. And I think the more important thing in this scenario is to see the other side of the arguments as well, and not to keep your mind, just a single track.
SubhanAllah. And do you see, last question, bro, from me, and maybe Sheikh Fahad wants to ask or Musa wants to ask you anything. do you see, like, mashallah, you obviously are someone that seems to grasp and you understand that these issues that are going on, and you can see through what's being done and these ideas that have been sort of thrown in there every now and then. But do you see students, other students who may not be as well grounded in Islam, being affected by such videos and such ideas?
I have some friends who I'm relatively happy with, who like don't accept these ideas with usually, even among the people who are, from good families and who from relatively elite families, they're not so accepting of these ideas because they've not lived in such environments as they've not lived abroad and stuff like that. So, but I think that, mostly people, what I've observed in university life, unless they have a very strong grounding, and even if they have a very strong grounding, because in our culture, there's that concept ke, yaar, ye to baatein Maulvi karte. There's that concept of Maulvi. So we like every critique that we have to give of Islam, because we in Pakistan is in basically most majority Muslim population, right? So basically you can't target Islam, that Islam is wrong. So what basically people do, they start critiquing Maulvis, basically, that these Maulvis are like this and stuff like that. So anyone who wants to present another view, he's afraid of being labeled as a Maulvi. So I think that mostly people, even my university, when I talk to them, there's this indoctrination going on, and these subjects are not related to our curriculum and stuff like that. So then, they think about it and stuff like that. But I think mostly, they're going with what the majority thinks and what's acceptable and stuff like that. So I think we really, as a Muslim ummah, we have to work on not being sheep. We have to learn not to follow and be leaders ourselves, and basically develop this confidence that if there's one person going on the right track, it's going to be me. So I think
Mashallah.
that's what's really lacking. Yeah.
Bro, absolutely. Your words were powerful. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow them to reach the youth in Pakistan and outside of Pakistan. Shafad, do you wanna ask Ali anything, or Musa?
No, I mean, I was just, it's interesting because I haven't, I'm gonna bear myself now. I haven't been to Pakistan in like 20 years. So the Pakistan that I remember is, I'm sure, drastically different than it is. I mean, even at that time, there were a lot of things that I was like, wow, this is insane, So I can't imagine what it's like now. But it's just interesting hearing what you're saying, and Imran, what you've kind of mentioned about your kind of journeys there and your contact with people there. It's just it's interesting how, well, first it's interesting the whole concept of like Maulvis and how they have like a bad rap, right? It would be fascinating to have someone who has the label of Maulvi and yet comes out as being very educated and erudite to completely demolish the entire stereotype of Maulvis.
Yeah,
that would be an interesting experiment, in fact.
But Sheikh, it's interesting you mentioned that. The interesting thing is, whenever on public platforms, whether it's many times on media in Pakistan as well, you'll see they would always pair up, and they create this type of false paradigm. They would always pair up an educated secular type of professor with someone who's not well educated, just to create this type. Okay, here's your archetype of a Maulvi, and here is an academic, and look how the academic's dealing with the Maulvi. But there's loads of educated practicing Muslims, like for example, Ali, you probably know, Youth Club, Raja Ziaul Haq, Taha Jalil, all of these guys, well educated, well grounded. If you put them against one of these guys, they'll probably deal with them quite well, really well actually. Yeah. But they wouldn't do. It's like it's not being done. And I don't know. It seems to be a movement which is up in the upper echelons of the elite class, and promoting these type of ideas as well now on public, on social media and TV and stuff like this. So it's sad to see that, but mashallah, there's good work going on the ground as well, which is alhamdulillah.
I mean, I've benefited from a lot of work that comes out of Pakistan specifically, and a lot of that work, interesting. It's not within like academia, right? So you'll have a lot of the best refutations of Ahmadis actually come straight out of like the village, right? Where you have people that know the Quran really well, and they know like the whole Mirzai movement or whatever it is, and they read the literature and things like that, and they'll just deconstruct it. And the guy's like wearing a dhoti and he's just hammering it, right? It's just he knows his stuff so well. But if he was to be, let's say, put against like an erudite, educated, upright professor, he would seem like someone who's backwards. But his arguments are so solid that you're not going to find that in any other area, you know, which I think is really fascinating. So I think that may be kind of a concept of perception. Allah knows best. Again, I haven't been to Pakistan in 20 years, so that's just me just spitballing it here. So,
Jazakallah khair. So, Ali, any last words you want to share, bro, before we
I just would like to add that, you know, in basically Pakistan and even over the West, you know, we just faced with this problem of basically this post-colonial mental state, you know. So even in my university, you know, usually in my home, I'm like wearing like all kinds of clothes and stuff like that. But in my university, you know, I really try to, you know, just try to stick to some traditional clothes and stuff like that, you know, every now and then and stuff like that. So basically, just, you know, just enforcing this fact that, you know, like my mind isn't that colonialized and stuff like that, you know. So I just would like your feedback on how to deal with this, you know, because I've seen that if you like for example, in Pakistan, if you wear a shalwar kameez and go to university, you know, no one would really even bother talking to you, you know. So I think a powerful way of doing that is like to have, like for me, you know, I thought like, you know, anyone who's a Muslim should basically have essentially what it means to be like the physical appearance of a Muslim, like for example, having a beard and stuff like that. I think it's extremely important in today's time, you know, because when you have a beard, even when I used to go to college and university, you know, people start looking with you in such a way that you're a Maulvi and stuff like that, that you somehow learn to own this view and start to defend it, you know. So I think stuff like this is important, but I think there's this balance that you have to maintain to not push people away as well, and not to, you know, just be get all into the symbols and stuff like that of the Western perspectives and stuff like that.
Jazakallah khair, bro. Musa, Shafad, I'm gonna have to pop out for like 5 minutes. If you guys want to just start flicking through the questions and see if anything sticks out and start going through some of the questions, inshallah.
all right.
And I'll
This
come
is
back
your
first.
show, though, right?
I know, but it's I normally end up doing this a lot.
This guy, man.
Musa is a deputy, so he's just stepping in, bro. It's his show now, inshallah.
All right.
I'll be back in 5-10 minutes, inshallah.
All right. We'll let you go for 5-10 minutes. Inshallah. All right, Musa, what do we got, man?
Subhanallah, he didn't even exit, so there's gonna be this box in the corner.
Can't get rid of it? He didn't give you like the ability to just.
I don't know. He should have exited. I don't know what he's done. I don't have no ability here. Yeah, I don't have.
Okay, khair, inshallah. All right, let's. I mean, can you see the questions?
Yeah, we can see the questions here.
All right.
There's at the moment. I mean, brothers and sisters, if you're watching and you have any questions, inshallah, we'll do a little bit of a Q&A now, inshallah ta'ala. We'll take some of your questions and see what's going on, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. You know, one thing that I did want to add regarding what we've been discussing for the last 5-10 minutes, 15 minutes or so, I think it's very, very important that, and I'm very happy that the discussion went in this direction, because this is the solution for us as Muslims to have an identity. And you know, Sheikh Fahad, like one of the things I was mentioning in the beginning is about the inferiority complex. One of the reasons why we have this inferiority complex when we look at these professors and these Western academics, etc., is because we simply, and this is not an exaggeration, we do not know what is there in our own tradition. We don't know. We literally don't know. I'll give an example now. The average Muslim, perhaps, you know, they'll look at this person as a Maulvi, etc., whatnot. They'll just look at him as a guy, he's wearing a hat, he's got a beard, he's wearing a shalwar kameez, etc., and he's just backwards, he's from the village, right? But even if you look from an academic, from a knowledge standpoint, I personally, and I'm sure you know people like this as well, where I know my professors who teach in the university, and I know what they know and what they don't know, right? And I know that sometimes, and I know they don't know everything, for sure. And I know that even what they do teach, even that, they won't know it the way that we as Muslims know our own knowledge. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, I personally, as Muslims now, what do we believe in? We believe in the Quran and the Sunnah. I personally know, and I'm sure you also personally know, Sheikh Fahad, I personally know people who have memorized the Quran with all 10 qira'at. I know people who've memorized all of Shatibiyah. and they will quote it to you off the top of their head, a book, right? I personally know people who have memorized books of hadith with over 1,000 ahadith in them. People who've memorized Riyadh al-Salihin, they've memorized Al-Muharrar, they've memorized Bulugh al-Maram, right? Books like this. We personally know people like this, right? And subhanallah, when you go into this and you compare these people who memorized the Quran and they've memorized ahadith to that level with chains of narration. One of the brothers I know, I'll give an example, simple example. Anyone who goes Medina University and they want to go into Kulliyat al-Hadith, right? They want to go into the faculty, the College of Hadith. What are the prerequisites? First of all, you have to have studied a text in Hadith studies, Mustalah al-Hadith, like Nukhbat al-Fikr, etc., right? On top of that, they expect you to have memorized Umdatul Ahkam, which is a book of ahadith on fiqh, which is around 400 ahadith, 450, I think, right? Around 450.
Yeah.
When you're in the college, so now you've been accepted, you're studying in the College of Hadith, you're expected to memorize around 3 ahadith a day with their chains of narration from a book called Al-Muharrar. So when you come out, you've memorized around 1,500 ahadith. Okay?
Right.
This, now let's compare this to Western academia, where, look, I'll be very, very honest here. You could go, and Sheikh Fahad, you can, I'm sure you're going to agree with this here. You could literally go into a BA program and you could relax for all of the year. When it comes to your assignments, you do your assignments, and khalas, you come out after 3 years and you've got a bachelor's in history. You could meet people who've got a bachelor's in history who don't have a clue about history. Literally, they don't know about history, right? Because all they've done is assignments.
Right.
They've done a few thousand words and khalas, right? Same way they've done a master's, PhD. Now you compare that to people who've memorized ahadith, they've memorized the Quran, they've memorized books, they've memorized Sahih al-Bukhari, they've memorized like poems and books and manzumat, and you compare their brain ability to your professor who's 70 years old, who's lived his life in academia. They're not comparable. They're not comparable.
They're not.
And this is the thing, when you as a Muslim realize this, that the literary and the academic background that you come from, where you have people like Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, between salawat, they're writing books, right? If I'm not mistaken, he wrote Al-Wasitiyah between Dhuhr and Asr, right?
Yeah.
Craziness, right?
Yeah.
Now you ask one of your academic, and this is a point here, ask one of them to write a book and reference the book, because they're referencing the books. Shaykh al-Islam is referencing the Quran. He's referencing the Sunnah in his books, right? Ask one of these academics to reference their texts between Dhuhr and Asr, right? And write a book. Write a book in that time off your memory. They can't do that. Impossible for them to do that. Because it's not the same.
No, it's true. And what's really interesting, so I'll give a book reference if people are interested, that speaking about this very phenomenon. It's called Epistemological Biases in the Physical and Social Sciences. It's published by IIIT. I don't know what it stands for, the Islamic Institute, something. Anyways, but it's IIIT. It's a really good book. And they talk about this very phenomena of, within academia, Western academia, like I was mentioning earlier, you can have a lot of knowledge about something that's very deep, right? That's researched well, but it's only about this sliver of knowledge. Yes. Whereas within the Islamic paradigm, or within the Islamic, let's say, history, and I wouldn't even say Islamic history, even till today, the idea is that you have a broad kind of stroke of knowledge, or this broad angle of knowledge, such that eventually you get to the point of you're trying to understand things in their totality. Because what does it mean to have sliver of knowledge that's deep? It means you're limited to that sliver. That's it. Yes, you can say everything you want about what that one little sliver, but everything else that's related to it, you're just kind of now making guesses, right? And it's kind of the downfall of the polymath. Like, you're not going to see people like Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah anymore, Imam al-Ghazali. These people that have such a broad range that can, like you said, not only write a book, but reference a book, that they can give, juridical rulings, and they're like teenagers, right?
Between Dhuhr and Asr, you know.
Between Dhuhr and Asr, right? And the thing is, that tradition is still alive in many places in the world. That's part of the look. I'll tell you that this morning, when we were in that meeting, I mentioned my son, and he's alhamdulillah, he's memorizing Quran, then he's memorizing Hadith. So I said, when I told him like I need to do a khatra this morning, give me some ideas, he's just rattling off Hadith like crazy, right? And I'm just like, okay, slow down, buddy. Like this is just take it easy, mashallah, and then and so the idea is that you have people like that who are extremely knowledgeable. The gentleman I was speaking about who knows, who kind of deconstructs the Ahmadiyyas, this guy, if you met him on the street, you would think he's like maybe one of the most jahil people you've ever met, just because of the style in which he talks, right? He comes from a village in Punjab somewhere, right? And he's coming out, right? And you would see him like this guy knows nothing. But then when he starts quoting the Quran, he's quoting like elements of the Arabic language, sarf, nahu, and he's telling you like, this is how it works. This is how the breakdown is. These are the books that this person wrote. On page 52, Ghulam Ahmad wrote X, Y, and Z. So ask him from this logical perspective, and you're just like, you would never imagine that. Like, there's a book on like a word for word of the Quran, right? And it was written by Sheikh Muhammad Mahar Ali. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a great book, especially if you're like a student and you're studying sarf and you use the Hans-Wehr dictionary, right? A lot of that's how we learn it. So it gives you a reference word, like through the entire, it's the 3-volume set. Brilliant. Muhammad Mahar Ali, he passed away, Allah yarhamhu. And what it was said about him was that he was originally from Bangladesh. And so he completed his studies, I think, in Riyadh, and then he went to SOAS, if I'm not mistaken. They said that his neighbor, who lived with him for years, never knew that he was a scholar. Because he was humble, but just the depth of knowledge and everything and we have the books to show it, right? Never knew it because he was just a simple person. And so how many gems do you have like that are out there and that you just marvel at how incredibly knowledgeable they are. And they may be people that you would just, if you saw them on the street, you may just pass by them and not even think twice.
Like Sheikh, you remind me, some of the brothers, Imran, I think you missed it, but I was mentioning, we were just comparing Western academia in terms of knowledge, right? And the Islamic perspective of academics, right? And, Sheikh, the people I was mentioning, like I actually personally know people who've got the 10 qira'at of the Quran off in their head, right? They've memorized, and if you guys know what that means, right? It's like memorizing the Quran 10 times over, right? Because honestly, like the amount of changes, etc., whatnot. On top of that, these people who I know have memorized these books of ahadith, right? If you met them in your local masjid, you just think he's a normal brother.
Yeah.
Normal brother, and by the way, the people who I've got in my head, right, who are mentioning it, none of them are above the age of 40 years old. All young, all still in their youth, all still memorized, all still on their path. So by the time they're 40 years old, only Allah knows where they're going to be, right? So the point is, subhanallah, the comparison is not, it's
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of that, the fact that they're unknown, is the effects of the knowledge that it has on them.
Yes.
And, if you go to university professors, some you'll find that okay, they may be humble, but many of them, I mean, humility is like the last thing they can possibly think about, right?
It's so true.
I'm the professor and you're just a rugrat student here, right? So just mind your, just remember your level, like who you are, and it's just, and then there's a big difference between that, right? Here you have a person who has all of this knowledge and the knowledge is having an effect on the person. They have this concept, phenomenology, right? You don't only look at the actual facts, but you look at the phenomena. Like, what is the phenomenon? What is the effect of that knowledge in both cases? So even if your professor knows a lot, what kind of an effect does it have on this person in terms of their personality, their shakhsiyah, versus someone who studied? What kind of an effect does it have? Now and let me not say, I don't mean to say this in a black and white format. There are people that have studied a lot within the Islamic tradition that could be very arrogant, right? That's just a spiritual disease that they have. But I'm just saying that, one of the reasons why we have these people that are unknown is because a lot of that has to do with the effects of the knowledge on them, which says a lot about your tradition. And so the people that are listening to this, that you may be going to university, understand you come from a very profound, deep, rational, spiritual tradition that is the truth at the end of the day. And that's something you should never, never forget. You are upon the truth. And that's, that's something that you move forward with, and everything else, it's on some sort of level of falsehood. Everything outside the Islamic framework.
So, Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Fahd Musa. This was, alhamdulillah, is very beneficial, and I'm sure everyone's benefited as well. So let's wrap up. Just if you, let's do two things. First, if you guys can give me like a 2-minute summary with any clarifications that need to be made, that we're not telling people not to go to university. So just summarize it for us, inshallah, and then we'll take a few questions and we'll wrap up, inshallah, in the next 5-10 minutes. So let's start with the Sheikh Fahd and then to my.
Okay.
Right.
Just as a summary, what I would say is that, again, we're not trying to tell people not to go to university, but just understand your deen, right? Understand where you're coming from. You come from a deep tradition, one that is based upon truth and values truth, right? And therefore, as you start your studies, understand some of the biases that are present in the subjects that you're studying, right? And it becomes very important. Know who you are and know that you are upon something that is great, And this is something that, you ask people that don't have Islam, especially people that are suffering through existential crises, ask them the value of Islam, right? Once they become Muslim, and that'll it'll humble you at the end of the day. This morning when I was asking my daughter about what I should talk about, she said, talk about Mason becoming Muslim. So Mason, he's a friend of my wife's nephew, and so he became Muslim, and said that was something. And she's 8 years old, and that's something for her. I was like, well, why would he become Muslim, right? Like, what's And as an 8-year-old, but it was something that she felt like, wow. And when you speak to Mason, you might get some insight within that, right? But you are upon the truth as you enter into university studies, or if you're already in university studies. Understand that there are biases that they have, and you cannot do without a worldview. So either you have the worldview of Islam or you have the worldview of something other than Islam. And then you need to decide, okay, well, which one is the truth? And of course, Islam is based on, it comes from al-haq, and it is haq.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Fahd Musa. Any last concluding words?
Yes, inshallah. So what I would say is that obviously the point, just to clarify, we're not saying don't go to university. In fact, for some people, it may be very beneficial for them to go to university and study. And, I'm in university. There's others in university. Sheikh Fahd, of course, went to university. Imran, if I'm not mistaken, you did as well, right? So, like...
You felt that.
Huh?
You don't know if I went to university? No, I'm listening about.
Just checking.
I'll call you later. Don't worry, bro.
Yeah. So we're not saying that, obviously, but the point is about understanding your position first. At the end of the day, as Muslims, alhamdulillah, we have Islam. We believe that Islam is the truth, and we live by that. And that belief should reflect upon our actions. How can it be so that there is a Muslim? He believes that Allah is God. He worships Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala day and night. He prays his Fajr. He prays his Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha. And he believes in Yawm al-Qiyamah. He believes in all of these things. Yet this same Muslim spends his life doing a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD, working a normal job. He works for his dunya. But he completely neglects learning Islamic knowledge. He doesn't know his ankle bone from his elbow in Islam. He doesn't know the difference between them. He doesn't know about anything, right? And this is a big problem. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ, right? That seeking knowledge is obligatory upon every single Muslim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in the Quran, يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. Knowledge is spoken about in our tradition. How knowledge raises you, how Allah raises those who have knowledge, right? And this is spoken about. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking about knowledge here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking about Islamic knowledge. Not your professor who's a kafir. And this shows you, if your professor passes away tomorrow, he may have had the world's knowledge. But if he didn't acknowledge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's a problem. So it's also about asking Allah for knowledge that benefits us. We know about the dua, you know, Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi', right? That for knowledge, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for knowledge that is beneficial. And we ask Allah for knowledge that is beneficial. And that's all I'd say. Barakallahu feekum.
There's loads of different questions, but somewhat off topic. But the main gist of the questions that were related to what we're discussing is, I think, all right, I've changed it now, but it was related to one main question, which was, so how do you give us some steps on how to build that strong foundations of Islamic knowledge before going to university? And say you're in the case where you are at university or have finished university, how do you now, retrospectively do that?
Well, I mean, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I would say to take advantage of the resources that you have around you, right? So, like I was mentioning, in the States, we have institutions where you can take like a year off and do like an intensive, right? Which, within that intensive, we understand that it's in the United States. It understands the society that's around it, and that 1 year might be something valuable for you to take a year off after high school and go to that 1 year and then go to university, right? If that's something you can do. So find institutions that are like that. And I'm sure there's a lot like that in the UK. I can't imagine that the Muslims in the UK are just chilling and they're like, yeah, we don't need to educate our kids, right? It's like, so if you can find an institution, that would be the best way to go, because then you're studying at the hands of a person, which is profound, right? And there's a profound difference between studying at the hands, at someone's hands versus just studying through books on your own. But let's say that you're in an area where there are no institutions, or you're looking to now study Islam. Well, I'm sure there's online institutions that you can now engage with and find. There's many online institutions, right, that you can go through like a certificate in Islamic studies that gives you the foundations. Let's say you don't even want to do that. People and scholars have written books on what are the levels of knowledge and the books you would need to cover. So you can get a book like Kitab al-Ilm by Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, which I benefited from a lot. And, it's translated in English as well. I think it's called the Book of Knowledge. And he lays out an entire curriculum for you, rahimahullah ta'ala, right? And so you have a curriculum and you go through it step by step. And you can find a lot of those things in the form of books, translated if you're not able to engage with the Arabic. And you can find lectures on those things, right? So you have an entire curriculum that's laid out, right? And if that's not your thing, there's other books that have other curriculum that are laid out. But I would say, look at your local area first. Find people that you can study with. I'll tell you this much: here in Houston, we have a lot of people who studied and who came back, and that are not your superstar rock star mashayikh, right? And yet they teach at the masjid. They're very humble. And I always tell people, I said, those are the gems of the community, right? He graduated from Medina. He didn't come back to say, let me become the next YouTube star. He came back and said, let me help my community, right? And so he's in his community and he's teaching the people, and he's going through those books that he went through in a way that's humble and that he understands the community he's dealing with, right? So I'm sure that you have people in your community that are there that are just, they're part of the daily grind, and they're teaching on a daily basis, and those are the people you want to actually look out for. Again, like I said, if you can't find them, look for some institutes that are there that teach that on a concentrated basis. If not that, look online. If not that, well, then like I said, there's a book recommendation that I gave. You can try that, or there's other books I'm sure that kind of take you through a curriculum. If you were to ask me what a person should focus on, I would say that just in my experience, one of the things that has kind of been lacking, if you're looking outside of the idea of a curriculum, is the connection with the Quran. So, if you're looking at what should I focus on, my advice would be to focus on the Quran. And that means kind of a comprehensive focus, right? Not only just memorizing it, but engaging with the text, engaging with the Arabic language, right? And that goes for whether you are an Arab or a non-Arab, right? So it doesn't just because you're an Arab doesn't mean you can just open the Quran and start reading it. And for those of you who have, who come from an Arab household, this very well, right? So, there's a big difference between whatever lahja you speak, right? And the Quran, right? And so therefore it's incumbent upon yourself as well, anyone for that matter, to engage with the language of the Quran. And and it's something that'll never, your thirst will never be quenched. You will keep on going, and it's this ocean that you just keep on diving into deeper and deeper, and it'll just amaze you over and over and over again. Allah knows best.
Jazakallah khair, Shafad. Musa, anything else you want to add to that?
No, I would say what Sheikh Fahad mentioned is very, very amazing, mashallah, about focusing on the Quran. I think, for Sheikh Fahad, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think honestly, I think a good place to start, for absolute beginners is reading a translation of the Quran.
Sure.
And especially one like this, I'm really benefiting from it, the clear Quran,
Mashallah.
where any things that need clarification are in the footnotes, contexts are given, verses are split up. How have you found it, Sheikh? What do you think of the clear Quran?
I actually find it really good, man. I'll tell you, I had an experience this morning, if we have a few minutes.
Yeah, go ahead, Sheikh.
So I was listening to Dr. Fadl Samurai. I don't know if you know who that is, but he's a linguist. He knows, he has these talks on YouTube, which is it's basically like linguistic features of the Quran, right? So Dr. Fadl Samurai, he's so much fun to listen to. So he was talking about Surah Al-Kafirun, right? And without getting into details, he kind of mentioned this idea of nominal tenses versus verbal sentences, right? And how Surah Al-Kafirun has a mix, and depending on the placement of the sentence, it's going to differ the meaning, even though the sentence is the exact same, right? So if you know Surah Al-Kafirun, you have two statements that, one, then a statement in between, and then the third statement. And in fact, so the statement, by the words are the exact same words. So I noticed in the translation, Dr. Mustafa actually gave it its appropriate, using that linguistic idea, that it gave a slightly different translation of the second time it's used, but he has a basis for that, which you're not going to get in other translations, I think, right? Which is something I was surprised to find, right? Because I was just listening to that Dr. Fadl, and then I saw it, and I was looking through Dr. Mustafa's translation. So I'm enjoying it, actually, because it takes those linguistic features, and then some of the notes also mention some of those linguistic features. So from that perspective, I'm enjoying it. I like it.
MashaAllah. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair, Shafad. Jazakallah khair, Musa. May Allah bless you both. And brothers and sisters, make sure to share this. Make sure to join us next Tuesday. We'll bring you another topic. There was one last question for Sheikh Fahad, a very important question. I might as well ask it. They said, where is Sheikh Fahad from? Where is he from?
You still don't know? Come on, man.
It's a mystery to some.
Man,
you're a tricky one. You don't necessarily look Pakistani at first, so it's up in the air for some people, I guess.
What's really interesting is that when I was studying Arabic at university, you have to pick a lehja, right? So you can pick Masri or Shami or whatever, So I picked Shami. So sometimes when I'll walk into some of these stores and I know the guys from Jordan, I'll start conversing with them in Shami, and the guy's just lost, right? And then he's like, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "I'm Ameriki," right? He's like, "Min asal," right? Where are you really from? And then I tell him, "Min asal Pakistani," right? And he's just like, "Oh, okay." He goes, "But I don't get it." He goes, "And you speak Ma'bad of Shu, and I like the lehja of the Shami lehja, right? Shami lehja." And so it's just fun. So min asal Pakistani, ولكن ولدت هنا في أمريكا. ولاية نيو جيرسي خصوصا صح؟ واضح؟
I'm sure everyone's understood that.
بالعربي, you need to study it, man. Come on, right? So alhamdulillah, I'm originally Pakistani. I was born and raised here in the US, specifically born in New Jersey. So
Jazakallah khair. So Jazakallah khair, and we will catch you guys next week. Before I go, make sure to, if you guys want another stream, there's Brother Isa is going to be doing Mind Asylum soon with Sabur. So join that. I'll be about 7:30, I think, on his channel, inshallah. Till next week. Assalamu alaikum.
wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.